myself again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you. If I don't say the words, then maybe it's not true. And it feels alright when they come and say to you.
Good morning, welcome to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith. Tuesday brings us Ross Gregory. Good morning, Ross.
Morning, Steve. Morning, everyone.
Good to see you, mate. And straight into the game of the weekend. The consensus of opinion on here seems to be that we didn't play that badly. It was just the same old problem. Once again, failure to hit the back of the net, which cost us. But we gave a good account of ourselves at the Etihad.
Yeah, I think that's a fair summary. Very similar to recent games. The games against Liverpool, Man United, and City. Now that's kind of three really big games against teams who are top six teams who are challenging for titles and cups and silverware. Arguably the three probably biggest and best teams in the country at the minute, along with Arsenal. So I thought it was an encouraging performance. I did think it was relatively encouraging. They weren't dominated. I didn't think. You might say that City didn't really have to get out of kind of certainly third, maybe fourth gear at times, which is possibly fair, and it always looked like they could maybe step it up a little bit. But at the same time, I thought Newcastle, stayed in the game, were really competitive, created again, like we've talked about, two or three not just half chances. I mean, I'd say at least three of those were really good chances, and didn't make the keeper work. Didn't take them, and you're not going to get too many of those against teams of Man City's caliber. When they come along, you've got to be ruthless. You've got to take them, and that was the same old story again on Saturday, unfortunately. But it was, all in all, I thought it was a relatively encouraging performance. There was some good individual displays, and as a team, they functioned quite well. So it's a difficult one, isn't it? It's you can get very negative about the way the last kind of month has gone. Or you can try to be a kind of glass half full person and say, look, it's not far off clicking again. There's some real positive signs there. It just needs that little bit of extra quality in both 18-yard boxes.
What did you make of Jamal Lascelles' performance?
I thought he was excellent. I thought he was very, very good. I think everybody probably had a little bit of nerves when the team was kind of announced, and Fabian Schär, who's obviously been an excellent performer for Newcastle this season, one of the more consistent players. And Jamal Lascelles has taken some stick on various different channels with various different parts of the fan base up against Erling Haaland, the possibly the best striker in Europe at the minute, or one of them. It would have cost a few flutters, no doubt about it. But I thought his performance was very, very good. I don't think you could fault his performance in any way, shape, or form. I was delighted for him. I thought it was a great way for him to come back in. He kind of answered the critics that he's had previously. He's shown that there's still a role for him at Newcastle if he's willing to accept. Obviously limited game time, but no, I was really pleased for him. I was really delighted because look, whatever you say about Jamal Lascelles is a player. If he's the right person as a captain, the right person to lead Newcastle into the top four, or the top six, or whatever. I don't think anybody should fault his commitment, his professionalism, the way that he's helped guide the club through some tricky spells. I think he's been a great servant to the club, and I was delighted to see his performance on Saturday.
Has he created a bit of a problem for himself anyhow? Because Lascelles came in, did such a great job, but ultimately from our perspective now, it gives him a little bit of an issue. I mean, obviously Shaw had delayed concussion. That was the reason he missed out. But I don't know whether he can drop Lascelles after that performance. He played really well.
He did. I think it's going to be a real interesting one, Steve. You're right, because you've got to be fair to players. You've got to be fair to somebody like, whether it's Jamal Lascelles or Matt Target or Joe Willock or ASM or whoever comes in off the bench, off the fringes. If they come in and they deliver and they perform, it's tricky. Look, you've ran teams, Steve. I've ran teams. Admittedly, nowhere near the level that we're talking about here, but it's the principles in some ways are the same. You know, you've got to be fair to players. You've got to, if somebody comes in and does a good job, is it fair to leave them out? So I think, look, I wouldn't be surprised if Jamal Lascelles does get dropped. It wouldn't surprise me in the slightest, even after that performance. But it has created a bit of a headache for Eddie Howe and Jamal Lascelles and any other player who comes in from the fringes. That's all they can do. They can only do is make themselves as indispensable as possible to try to prove a point to the manager that they should have been playing week in, week out anyhow, and to kind of stake that claim for a starting berth the next time out. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happens this weekend.
Yeah, no, it certainly will be. I think from my perspective, it was just great to see Lascelles come in and do such an accomplished job. It gives you that option as well. And I mean, he creates a bit of mayhem in the opposition box as well, doesn't he?
He does. And that's actually not a bad point, Steve, as well. That's, we've talked about Newcastle's weakness on set pieces attacking wise recently, that they've not looked at goal scoring threat at too many occasions, even though you've got Shea, Botman, Dan Burn, Joe Linton, all 6 foot plus in there, and somebody of Kieran Trippier's ability with his delivery. Jamal Lascelles gets his fair share of goals. He does create a bit of havoc in there and attacks the ball really, really well. So he does offer a different option. I think it's a good poser for Eddie Howe. It's something that he'd much rather be putting Jamal Lascelles in there and him having a stormer and then having to make that tough decision rather than him coming in and having a bit of a nightmare. So I think he offers plenty at both ends of the pitch. Jamal Lascelles. Look, we know what weaknesses he's got. He's not as accomplished on the ball as Fabian Shea. He's not going to bring the ball out. He's not going to hit 50, 60 yard diagonal passes. He's not going to step into that midfield, break the lines and rifle one into the top corner, which we know that Shea can do on occasions. But what he does have in his locker, Jamal Lascelles, is an ability to attack the ball in both boxes. He will. He's got a physical presence. He will defend ruggedly. Sometimes a little bit too ruggedly. He's not the most like we said. He's not a Rolls Royce by any stretch of the imagination. But at the minute, Newcastle is suffering for me. That's suffering in both 18-yard boxes. Conceded a few goals from set pieces recently. Don't look like scoring at the other end. So maybe somebody who offers something a little bit different is what's needed.
Yeah, definitely is. The problem up front, really, with Wilson. What do you think it is? Do you think it's just a run of bad form? Because that's what I was saying last night on the fans forum. I just felt that potentially, all strikers go through a run of bad form, and maybe it's just as simple as that. Yeah,
it might be. I think what's slightly concerning for me with Callum Wilson is that I think you can understand a little bit sometimes when strikers go out of form in terms of their goal scoring, in terms of they're not as sharp in front of goal, or they're having a bit of bad luck, or there's a bit of a kind of or the opposite, or the teammates aren't creating enough chances for them, or things like that. I think that's or the snatching of things, the confidence goes, etc., etc. We've all seen very good strikers go through kind of barren spells. Even someone as great as Alan Shearer, I remember occasions him going through barren spells where maybe he's been 6-7 games without a goal or whatever it was. I think that the concern for me with Callum Wilson also, though, is that the rest of his play seems to have suffered as well. His hold-up play, his energy, his pressing. I go back to that game at the end of last season against Arsenal when he'd been out for a couple of months, I think it had been, and he came back into that game and he absolutely destroyed Arsenal just with he terrified them with his pace, his relentless pressing, his physical attributes. He just absolutely dominated them, and we're not seeing that with Callum Wilson at the minute. We're not seeing him being kind of prolific in front of goal. He got his goal against West Ham a few weeks ago, but other than that, it's not really happened for him. And he missed a couple of good chances in that game as well, to be fair. But we're not seeing that other side of him from me as well. That kind of all-encompassing kind of physicality and strength and running into the channels and absolutely terrifying centre halves. So I don't know if it is just a lack of form, a lack of confidence, or if he's just not physically quite recovered from the illnesses and the knocks and the niggles that he had over, since he came back from the World Cup. But whatever it is, he's not the same player that he was. He's suffering a little bit. I think that then is perhaps making him suffer in front of goal as well. His confidence isn't quite there. So it's an interesting one. And, I'm sure Eddie Howe and his coaching team and the medical staff and everybody around the club at the backroom staff will be trying to put their finger on it, what it is with Callum Wilson. I'm sure Callum Wilson is himself. And, I wouldn't bet against Callum Wilson coming back and scoring, 6-7 goals between now and the end of the season still, because he's still a very, very good player. But he's just not in the best shape of form or fitness at the minute for me.
Okay, lots of questions coming in. All of them really roughly about the same, the same kind of thing. I'll read a few of them out. BT says, whilst Wilson's got 7 goals so far this season and has only scored once in the league since the end of October, should the opportunity be passed to Isak against Wolves? Chippers says, does Ross think it's time for Gordon and Isak to get a run in the team and drop Wilson or ASM or Miggy? Tom simply asks, is it time to change the formation at the weekend? John Askew says, should Eddie consider going with Wilson, Isak, Gordon and Maxi, or will he just stick to type? And Darren Lee says, this weekend we should start with ASM, Isak and Gordon. So no place for ASM in that lineup. So is it time for a change? 14 games to go, Ross.
I think it is, Steve. Yeah, I think. Look, what Eddie Howe has always been and is done very well. He's been loyal to the players who've served him well, who've put in the performances, who've scored goals, and even when they've had a bit of a dip in form, he's been loyal to them. I think Newcastle's issues now in front of goal are getting to the point where something has to be done now. Something has to be changed. I think it's the famous saying of it's the insanity of doing the same thing and expecting to get different results. I think that there needs to be a real shake up. I was surprised that Alexander Isak didn't start on Saturday. I really was. I thought after Callum Wilson's performance in the cup final, I thought Isak was nailed on to start, to be honest. I thought he was one of the better players in the cup final when he came on, albeit in a bit more of a withdrawn role. So for me, it was a surprise that he didn't start. It's nice to see Anthony Gordon get a start. I don't think he really got into the game too much, bits and pieces in the first half, and then didn't really kind of click in the second half. But I think that the pair of them, Gordon and Isak, they've cost 100 million between the two of them. Let's start them. Let's get them starting and find out how to play with them, what the best formation is to get the best out of these two kind of huge signings that Newcastle have made, instead of putting them on the bench or putting them in and bringing them back off, putting them in, get them a consistent run of games and find out, right, this is how to get the best out of Anthony Gordon. It might be on the left, it might be on the right, it might be as a 10. This is how we need to get the best out of Alexander Isak. Is he playing as a 9? Is he playing as a wide forward? Is he playing as a second striker? I think it's a no-brainer for me. And that's not me criticising Eddie Howe. I'm absolutely not. Eddie Howe knows more and has forgotten more about football than I ever will in management and coaching and everything else like that. But I think it just needs freshening up now. I think Callum Wilson needs to be taken out the starting lineup. I think Miggy Almiron probably needs to be taken out the starting lineup as well, but I don't think that I'm not convinced that will happen. I don't think he's hit his straps either. But I really think it needs freshening up. I'm going to throw one other name into the mix as well, which will probably get a few comments in the chat. But I'm going to throw Jacob Murphy's name into the mix because I thought he's looked quite sharp when he's coming. I don't know if he's doing enough to start games, and I know he's a level below the rest of those players that we've discussed. But he works hard. He delivers good balls into the box. I think, Eddie, and I know Eddie Howe likes him, so I'll just throw his name into the mix as well. He's somebody who hasn't been talked about, doesn't get talked about, and I can see why, because there is more sexier names and let's be honest, better players. But sometimes it needs something, a little bit of creative thinking. It needs a little bit of a different, just a bit of point of difference and something that might just shake it up a little bit. So I wouldn't rule him out completely of coming into a front three, but Alexander Isak and Anthony Gordon, if they are fit between now and the end of the season, it should be starting every game for me, I think.
Yeah, it's going to cause lots of conversation over the next few weeks. I'm sure the fact that maybe Eddie has been a bit loyal to certain players, and Gary Douglas is saying, "Can I not see that Callum Wilson's been poor?" Of course I can, mate. I do a show every day of the week on here, and I've said he's in a bad run of form at the minute. And Ross says, maybe it is time to rest him. A lot depends on what he's going to do with the formation and how he's going to change things, of course. So we will watch within rest. Look forward to Eddie's press conference on Friday, as always. Roger says, "Is this like a last chance saloon for players like ASM, Wilson, and Miggy before the summer?"
Ooh, that's a good question, that, Roger. I mean, that is a really good question. I don't know about last chance saloon. Miggy's just signed a 3.5-year contract, which we briefly touched on when I was on last week. And I'll be honest, that one knocked me a little bit sideways. I thought that was a strange one. Yes, he's been fantastic this season, but he had a purple patch which we all knew was never going to last, and we all knew was kind of, how can I say this without being kind? What wasn't kind of reflective necessarily of the performances that we'd seen before or since. So, but he's been given a 3.5-year contract. That intimates to me that he's very, very much a part of the plans going forward. So, I don't necessarily think it's a last chance saloon for him. But there is certainly a couple of 3 or 4 or 5 players who have got a bit to prove now between now and the end of the season, because Newcastle are going to go again in the summer. They're going to strengthen again. They're going to look to bring in some exciting and big name and high profile players. They're going to look to move 2 or 3 out, and they're probably going to have to move 2 or 3 out also to partly balance the books and help fund some of this transfer activity. So absolutely, there's some players in that squad. Not just the fringe players, not just your players who you'd expect to move on. Some of the ones who are in and around that first team, in and around that starting 11, maybe ASM, maybe Callum Wilson, maybe 1 or 2 others who have got a little bit to prove between now and the summer.
Yeah, definitely. Lots of people in agreement that Murphy has certainly made fans think after his cameo roles in the final and against City. He's always been very unlucky as well in front of goal. He's always hit the post, hit the bar, but he's willing to have a go. And that really is, that is something that is always good to see, it really is. I'll come to some of these later messages in a bit, because there was a few questions I wanted to get through. Gary Douglas said, "Steve, why is Eddie constantly leaving it to the 60-minute mark before he makes a change before them subs? The subs at Man City should have come at half-time." It's a managerial thing, that, isn't it? Brucey used to do it on 65. It's a weird
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, it is. You know, you don't often see managers making tactical changes before then. Having said that, you know, you can say what you like about Eddie making them 3 subs against City, but in the cup finally made a sub at half time again. You know, Alexander Isak came in and Sean Longstaff went off, and Newcastle changed formation to a kind of 4-2-3-1. Which was a bold move, and it's something that needed to be done. Obviously 2-0 down in the cup final, and that needed to be a kind of a bold, you know, win or bust type of move. I thought it was a bold call, to be honest. I thought he got his calls really spot on Saturday. Eddie Howe. I thought, you know, Newcastle were only 1-0 down at this point. They were in the game. They were looking relatively competitive, and he made this, you know, this bold triple substitution, bringing on Alexander Isak, ASM, and I think the third was Joe Willock, wasn't he? Was it Joe Willock, the third one? Yeah. Sorry, you have to forgive me, Steve. I was holed up in a Malaga bar watching the game. Some of my recollections are a little bit hazy, shall we say? But yeah, I thought that was a really bold move, and kind of went for it. Went right. Look, 1-0 down, 30 minutes to go, whatever it was. Let's put 3 attacking players on and have a go at it. And if the finishing had been a bit better, then it would have been hailed as an absolute masterstroke, tactical masterstroke. You know, Joe Linton missing that chance, well, didn't, you know, not even connecting with it. ASM Alexander Isak, you know, looked lively and almost made an impact as soon as he came on. Just didn't kind of get that finishing in a touch. If they had done that triple substitution, I think would have been hailed as a masterstroke. I thought he got his tactics and his substitutions and his team selection pretty much spot on Saturday. Maybe bar the Callum Wilson starting, but it just didn't happen in front of goal, and there's only so much a manager can do.
Yeah, I would agree, mate. John Askew asks, are journos likely to quiz Eddie on the set-piece frustration, or is it a bit too sensitive? Somebody as well asked a question earlier about journalists potentially asking Eddie about Wilson's form again. I mean, just for people out there. I mean, you know, I do a chat about the press conference anyway. But you know, when you go to press conferences, Ross, you've been to them before. You know, are you told to avoid certain questions? You know, at clubs, not necessarily just Newcastle, but do you get a list of questions you can't ask, or is it pretty much ask what you want to ask?
Yeah, it's pretty much ask what you want to ask. You know, there's sometimes the very, very, very rarely, and you know, I've been doing this job for a lot of years, and you know, every now and again there will be something where you're given a steer and said, look, this is kind of off the table, but it's normally something where it's a sensitive issue in terms of, not sensitive because, you know, the manager might take the hump, but because it's a kind of sensitive. I don't know, maybe it's a disciplinary issue or a you know, do you know what I mean? Something like that. But there's no questions that are off the table. There's nothing that you don't have to submit a list of questions that you're going to ask before you go in. You don't get stopped from asking something. You might get shut down very, very quickly by the manager, or sometimes, you know, occasionally a press officer might intervene and say, look, we're not answering questions on that today, but there's nothing set in stone before you go in, and certainly nothing is kind of quite as I suppose just run of the mill as a player's form or fitness or the tactics that have been adopted. I think you would have seen over the kind of the COVID break, when journalists weren't allowed into the press conferences. It was all done via Zoom calls or video calls or whatever. It became a little bit more tricky for journalists there to ask all the questions, because they were restricted to one, and then it was move on to somebody else and move on to somebody else. When everybody's in that room together, it's a lot more free flowing, and you know, you can follow up on questions, and you know, fellow journalists will then follow up and bounce off each other as well. So There's certainly nothing off the table, and I would expect Eddie Howe to be asked about all manner of things, particularly when the team's in a little bit of a rut. But equally, he's not going to come under huge pressure or intense scrutiny from journalists, because it's a very difficult. They're not fighting a relegation battle. They're not deep in a disastrous situation. The fifth, sixth in the table and pushing for Europe, and just being in the first cup final for 24 years. So it's a little bit of context that's got to be taken. It's very different to the Steve Bruce situation. Very different to when we've seen explosive press conferences in the past with Joe Kinnear and Ruud Gullit and people like that. So they're very respectful press conferences. It's a lot of people, journalists, interviewers doing their job, the managers and the media officers and the press officers doing their job, everybody working together to try and get the best outcome. But there's certainly nothing off the table, and we've seen that with Eddie Howe. He's been asked some really difficult questions about the Saudi situation. He's been asked some very tricky questions about the ownership. So they weren't vetted beforehand. They weren't told you can and you can't ask this. So yeah, it'll be an interesting press conference, as they always are towards the end of the week. Eddie Howe is very, very good at kind of answering questions and deflecting them and not giving too much away. Sometimes it doesn't make for the best copy for journalists. It doesn't make for the best sound bites. He's not one of those types of managers. Steve Bruce would give you a lot more headline grabbing quotes, shall we say?
How's the bacon?
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes not intentionally, just foot and mouth disease sometimes. But Eddie Howe is very accomplished with the press, very accomplished with the media, and is trusted to answer any questions that journalists pop in front of him.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Question from Darren. He says, any truth in the Kieran Tierney rumours? He says, doing the rounds for a new left back. Kieran seems to be always injured. If you look into his injury record, it's not as bad as you would think. It would be a gamble spending £30 million plus. This again, it's a bit early, isn't it? We're in March. Transfer window's not the summer. It's a story that won't go away. And again, the other one that's doing the rounds is the moment that Roger mentions is, as he calls it, Scottish Scott McNobody, Emmanuel Castoff. I think he means Scott McTominay. But lots of rumours surrounding other players, and Chip has chipped in with Alex Scott at Bristol as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be the nature of Newcastle that there's going to be links between now and the end of the season. It's not going to go away, and Newcastle have obviously already started their preparations for the summer transfer window, and they will already be scouting players. They will already have compiled lists. They will already be speaking to agents about who might be available and where the opportunities may be come the window, because they want to put themselves in a good position. You don't just get to the end of the season or July the 1st when the transfer window officially opens and then go, right, now time to get down to work. The preparation and the scouting and everything else has been done months and months and sometimes years in advance. In terms of those three players, Kieran Tierney, my understanding is that he's somebody that Newcastle do like. They've got currently four left backs, I suppose. If you count Dan Burn as a bona fide left back, you've got Dan Burn, Matt Targett, Jamal Lewis, and Paul Dummett. Do any of those four fit the bill at what Eddie Howe's looking for this, to take the team forward? I don't know. I would expect Matt Targett to get a bit of a run between now and the end of the season. I don't think there's probably much future at the club for Paul Dummett, unfortunately. Being a great servant, and Jamal Lewis just they're not in the frame at the minute. So I think I think it's really up to Matt Targett now at left back to kind of try to what we talked about before, Steve. One of them players who's got between now and the end of the season to kind of prove themselves, which might sound a little bit daft and a little bit harsh on Matt Targett when he's only just signed last summer, but Newcastle need to kick on to that next level, and they'll be looking to strengthen in a lot of positions. Kieran Tierney's a fantastic player. I've said on this program before. I think he's a real talent. If he can get himself fit and get a run of games, he's not in the Arsenal side at the minute because of the form of the rest of the team and Zinchenko and players like that. So, but he's a real talent, and I think there'll be a few clubs looking at him in the summer. Scott McTominay, I like Scott McTominay. I know people don't. A lot of people don't. That's just an individual preference of mine. I think he's a steady hand. I think he's a decent player. I think he would improve Newcastle's midfield in terms of the depth and strength. I really do. Alex Scott at Bristol City is probably the most talked about and exciting player in the Championship at the minute, or one of probably in the top three. There'll be a lot of clubs interested in him, but he looks like a real talent. So, and that's what Newcastle are looking at. They're looking at players who are in that kind of age bracket who can maybe step up and deliver in the Premier League as well. So, but yeah, they'll be making inquiries and scouting players and watching players and compiling their lists already ahead of the summer window.
A question on the screen from John: is the next transfer window likely to be our biggest to date? With Europe likely, it might have to be, he says.
I think each transfer window is going to be the next. As soon as the one comes around, it's always going to be the next biggest, if that makes sense. I think it's always got to be a case of trying to improve the squad, trying to bolster the numbers, trying to make the most of these opportunities. If Newcastle played in Europe, if qualified for Europe, which isn't there's no guarantee of that at the minute, given the form that Newcastle have suffered over the last month, and then we've seen like Brentford, a fantastic win last night over Fulham, who themselves are doing well. There's teams sniffing around who will look to try and catch Newcastle, but if they do get into Europe, they're going to need a good 4, 5, 6 players just to cope with the extra demands of playing Thursday, Sunday, or if Champions League did come off, Tuesday, Wednesday, Saturday, Sunday, it becomes quite relentless. So it will be a very, very big window, not just because of Europe, just because the club again have shown how close they can get and now know what they need, I think, to push on and kind of properly challenge the top 4.
Okay, it's definitely going to be an interesting one, that's for certain. We definitely need players. And Gary Douglas says, Ross, next time you're in a press conference, ask Eddie Wise, keep him fair with Callum when he's not finding the back of the net. I do think that a lot of people do talk about his form. It gets asked in a roundabout way, Gary. It certainly does. I've listened to the press conferences. Anyway, halfway through the show, time for the ads. A big thanks to all our sponsors, Skips and Bins. You can find them at skipsandbins.com. Telephone 0800 25 45 25 3. Email inquiries at skipsandbins.com. Easy contract, free and pay as you go, waste collection. Thanks to Mr. Vicky's sauces, which are handmade in Cumbria. You can order them from mrvickies.co.uk or by calling 01768 210 102. Welcome aboard to Fruy Vita Getaways. You can email them at fruivitagetaways@gmail.com. Call or text them 0792 842 7895. Please join and share our Facebook group as well at Fruy Vita Getaways. Book your holidays or short breaks in the UK or around the world with them. Let them find your happy place. ABTA and ATOL registered. Thanks to Media Arts for all the help with the video side of things. And thanks to qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend, Newcastle. And the guys who run our website, NUFCmatters.com, where you can buy lots of t-shirts and merchandise. If you want to subscribe to the show, hit the subscribe button underneath this video today. It is free to do so. Hit the thumb up to like the video. It's good for the algorithm. And click share to your other social media. If you do subscribe, we do send you a free car sticker. To get that, email john@nufcmatters.com and he'll post you one out. If you want to join the NUFC Matters cult, then put your smartphone over this QR code now and it will take you straight there. Alternatively, go to the website nufcmatters.com, and you can join for a one-off payment of £25. You'll receive a cup, a pen, a membership card, and a scarf, and entry into the monthly draw. You can also join via YouTube, and if you click join beneath the video, you will see a variety of prices and how you can support the channel. You can alternatively make a donation with a super chat in the chat tonight. Just click the $sign. We're also available on iTunes and Spotify and other podcast providers. We also help the food bank on this show. NUFC fans, foodbank.co.uk is where you'll find the matchday bucket, and you can make a virtual donation 365 days of the year. As always, we've got a whole host of events coming up throughout the year. An evening with Nobby Solano takes place on Saturday the 25th of March at the Tyneside Irish Centre. Tickets £15. Book now at nufcmatters.com. An evening with Peter Beardsley at Leamington Labour Club. Tickets are £20. 31st of March, and you can get them direct from the venue. An evening with Nobby Solano, Good Friday, the 7th of April at 4 p.m. Tickets are a tenner and available behind the bar at Felling Cricket Club in Gateshead. An evening with Supermac, hosted by Gibbo at the Tynemouth Surf Cafe, Tuesday the 11th of April, and tickets direct from the venue. This is a limited ticket event, only 35 tickets available, so book soon. And an evening with Frank Clark and John Gibson, Thursday the 20th of April. Tickets are £15. Book now at nufcmatters.com. In June, Rob Lee will be at Louis' Liquor Store in Newcastle, and you can get tickets direct from the venue. And an evening with Rob Lee, Lee Clark, John Beresford takes place the following evening, Friday the 2nd of June at the Grand Hotel in Gosforth. This is in aid of the Healing Tour charity, and tickets are available from their website, www.healingtour.org.uk/events. And if you're a boxing fan, the Night of Champions comes to Gateshead at the Fed. Frank Bruno, Ricky Hatton, Nigel Benn, and Joe Calzaghe are part of the UK tour, and you can get your tickets from www.goldstarpromotions.co.uk. Okay, back to the comments. How much do you think qualifying for Europe might hinder our league prospects next season? This season, we haven't had that burden. Good question, John.
It is a good question. It's it kind of links into what we talked about on the previous question, is that strength and depth, and we've seen that Newcastle, once you scratch the surface of the squads and go kind of beyond the first 14, 15, then there's a dip in quality. Newcastle have been fortunate in that they've only had to play once a week, the odd midweek game obviously, but the odd game you kind of want to it's been able to keep a settled team, a really structured team. The back four's barely changed, the midfield three's barely changed. There's been the odd tweak up front, putting extra games, putting another 10, 12 potentially games into a season is going to put such a strain on that squad, such a strain on the players that we've seen before in previous years when Leicester and West Ham and a couple of others have gone into Europe, have challenged for Europe, when the squads haven't been quite robust enough, or not necessarily robust enough, but the clubs aren't set up or used to that cadence of Sunday Thursday. They're not used to that rhythm of games as well, and them coming thick and fast. It has affected league form, and it has seen teams struggle and not be able to produce as stronger performances in the league. So I think it's a genuine kind of not necessarily concern, because you'd still much rather be in Europe than not in Europe, but it's something that needs to be factored into the planning.
Okay. Other questions regarding Europe. Roger Cook says, is Champions League hunt still realistic, given that even an early failure gives another UEFA Cup chance? Ross, there was another question about Europe as well. Barry was similar. Yeah, he goes, do you agree with fans, Ross, that Newcastle will look outside of the Premier League for players, stuff the big six, they won't sell it us anyway? So go to the European thing first. I mean, I'm still quietly confident we will qualify for Europe. Champions League's going to be tight. I think it's a battle between 4 teams. I think we'll know a lot after, Wolves and Forest. I think we'll know a lot then. But, is Champions League still realistic? And would you want to finish in a Champions League position, Ross?
I don't think it's realistic now. I think that ship has probably sailed. I think there's too many other teams with either momentum, look at Liverpool recently, or bigger, stronger squads that can cope with this. When it gets this, or more experienced squads which can cope with the kind of squeaky bum time. So Spurs aren't in great form, but when you've got someone of Harry Kane's class up front, and you've got more than half a chance of sneaking a 1-0 win or something when you're not playing particularly well. So I don't think Newcastle will finish in the Champions League places. Unfortunately, I hope I'm wrong, obviously. And that, I suppose that answers your second question. Yeah, I would absolutely love Newcastle to get back into the Champions League. I'm not somebody who thinks it's too soon. I think you take opportunities and you take chances when they come along. You grab them with both hands, because it might not come around again for a long time. So you take those opportunities when you can. You don't pass them up, and you don't say, yeah. For me, I don't think you can afford to go, oh well, we don't really want Champions League anyhow. We're not quite ready for it. You make yourself ready for it. You get in the Champions League, you get extra revenue, you attract a higher caliber of player to the club, and it boosts your profile, boosts your finances, boosts your FFP potential. So I'd absolutely love Newcastle to get into the Champions League, and the whole glamour and finance and magic that comes with it for those of us who've been lucky enough to see Newcastle play in that competition previously.
Alan Thompson pointed out that the contract that Miggy signed means we'll probably get a lot more for him in the summer, which is a skeptical way of looking at it.
It is skeptical, but it's a fair point as well. I'll be honest, it has crossed my mind myself. You tie somebody down. The extra contract means that you can ask for a little bit more of them in the summer. I'm not sure if it is the case, but fair play, Alan. It's something that had crossed my mind as well.
And players is what Barry's talking about. I mean, do you think we'll probably look outside the Premier League with the reluctance of the big six to sell to us?
Possibly, yeah. I mean, I think Newcastle aren't unwilling to look anywhere for players that they're quite happy to look in France for a Sven Botman or a Bruno. They're quite happy to cast the net to different areas, to Spain for an Alexander Isak. What I will say is, and what they've shown a real preference for at the minute is players with Premier League experience, with experience of the English game. Kieran Trippier, Nick Pope, Dan Burn, Anthony Gordon. The list goes on and on and on. A lot of the players that they've been linked with, your Kieran Tierney's and your McTominay's and so on and so forth, the players who've got experience of the Premier League, experience of English football. That's one of the preferences that they've certainly had over recent transfer windows, because they want to kind of hit the ground running. But Newcastle are going to have to spread their net as wide as possible to try and get the best young players, try to get the best bargains, try to get players that also they're shopping in a different market to what the top six are. For all Newcastle's riches still and the financial benefits that the takeover has brought, they're still not be able to compete and spend the way Chelsea have spent. They're not able to compete and spend. They couldn't go and spend 100 million on a Jack Grealish like Man City, or some of the money that Man United have spent over recent years. They're still not quite at that level yet, so they've got to be a little bit cuter and a little bit cannier with the way that they try to resource players in.
Yeah, I think Ian's right here. He says, seriously, what were you expecting? Win the league and cup in 12 months from being odds-on favourite to go down? Yeah, sadly, Ian, some of the fans are just ridiculous. I agree with you, mate, 100%. It's crazy. And Gary Douglas, you're right as well. Newcastle are not ready for Champions League, lads. Definitely not. It would be embarrassing. Jody Tumba Life says, of course, the Champions League is still on. We have every chance. Yes, you are wrong, Ross. He also said earlier that Scott McTominay is not good enough for Wickham, which again I think you would probably maybe you might disagree with that actually. Not wanting to speak for the chairman, of course. I'm going to move on to this though. It's just Bob says, are Eddie's tactics now being found out? They're the same they were at Bournemouth. Has he got what it takes to change it, or is it up to some of the players that he doesn't know where to play them? Potentially, there seems to be this common thread that Eddie needs to change it up, do something different, subs at half time. We don't have the squad to do that, says Ian. Who I'm getting the impression, Ian, you're very much a realist like me. But yeah, I mean, I think, you know, my honest opinion is, Ross, that I think they have been found out to a degree. I mean, that little triangle that was doing so well, Bruno, Trippier, and Almiron, as you know, it's been easy. Man United just marked him out the game. Liverpool trying to mark Bruno out the game. He's struggling a little bit with his ankle, which hasn't helped, of course. Almiron, as we all know, was in a rich vein of form. He's struggled, and Trippier hasn't performed to the best of his ability since the turn of the year. So, you know, maybe it's a little bit of that, but also just, you know, coming down to the way that the players have performed.
I think it's a combination of a few different factors, and I think all are fair to shout about, but probably all factor in together, and there's not necessarily a silver bullet with it. I do think that Newcastle's style of play has been cottoned onto a lot more by opposition managers and opposition teams. You know, the break for the World Cup allowed every club to kind of reset and have a look and look at the way that they wanted to approach games. And Newcastle's patterns of play had become quite obvious in some ways. So that little trio, like you talked about there, Steve, that Bruno, Trippier, Almiron worked really, really well. You know, you could throw, you know, Sean Longstaff into that as well. You know, and that right hand side was a real source for Newcastle. The left, they know that they're not going to. You know, you look at opposition. If you're an opposition manager, you know that Newcastle aren't going to create anything too much down that left at the minute in terms of overlapping. You know, so you've got Kieran Trippier overlapping on the right, as Miggy tucks inside, but you don't have that same on the threat on the left. So I think there was part of it is the tactics have been found out a little bit. I do think as well though that part of the issue isn't just a dip in form, whether it's tiredness or whether it's just just form just dipping through natural consequences. You know, you're not going to keep at the same levels every game for a 38-40 game season. So I do think there's an element of that, coupled with the fact that Newcastle then haven't been able to freshen it up too much because the players that they have on the fringes aren't necessarily up to the right standards or whatever it may be. So I think there's a few different factors behind it. Look, Eddie Howe and Jason Tindall and Graham Jones will be working very, very hard, diligently on the training ground, looking for different things that they can give them that 1 or 2 or 3% difference. And I think that's all it is, really. I don't think there's a lot wrong. We've seen that Newcastle is still creating a few, you know, still creating chances. Maybe it's not as many as good a chances as what they were, but they created 3 or 4 good chances against Man City. Just didn't take them. So we're looking at kind of 3 or 4 percentage difference to where they were for me. It's just trying to get that extra little percentage out, trying to maybe bring in a couple of different things that might help, and that might be through different personnel, a Jacob Murphy or Anthony Gordon or you know, playing Joe Willock in a 10 role or Alexander Isak or whatever. It might be a slight tactical switch, but I think Eddie Howe's got to be very careful because I don't think he'd want to be too reactive and think, right, you know, we've had a bad month. Let's completely rip up what we've done previously, what we've done in the rest of the season, and change tactics and go to a completely different formation or whatever. I think it just needs to be small tweaks rather than ripping up everything that's served Newcastle well so far this season.
Yeah, I would agree. And Tom, the answer to your question is it depends how many we'll let go as well. You know, be a few going out the door. Darren says that we need 3 quality players, bringing in maybe 4 maximum. And again, it all depends on financial fair play. Len Arnold says, morning lads, I'd stick Target back in at left back for Burn as well. Any truth in our interest for João Pedro? It's been linked, hasn't it, Ross? It's another one of those for the summer.
Yeah, he's able to come up. Newcastle have obviously been linked and had a strong interest in them before, and they've shown that they're willing to go back to targets that they haven't necessarily got the first time round. They showed that with Anthony Gordon, with Sven Botman. They're quite happy to go back and be patient and be persistent. So I think he'd be another one that probably gets mentioned in the summer, and he's somebody that they will be continuing to monitor.
Yeah, definitely one for the summer chats, I think. Should we go in for Brendan Johnson at Forest? He's young, creative, scores goals with a good character. Certainly played well at the weekend.
Did, yeah, exciting young player. He's come on leaps and bounds. I don't know. I've not seen enough of him to know is he better than Miggy Almiron? Is he better than ASM? I don't know. Not Anthony Gordon. I've not seen enough of him to say, but he's obviously doing very well at Forest at the minute.
Yeah, definitely is. Again, lots of players will be linked with Newcastle, as we know. When Joe Linton plays on the left, Willock plays and makes things happen. So why, when Maxi plays, do people get on Burns' back? How about the left midfielder helps out instead, not just Burn? Yeah, you're right. Again, Mark Todd says if we get Champions League, it gives us the ability to move on as a club to attract and afford better players. Again, that's the other side of it. And Tom was asking earlier, do you think Bruno would leave if we didn't get Champions League? I don't think so. I think he's ready to sign a new contract. Will we act earlier in the next window? In previous ones, we seem to leave things late on and possibly miss out as a result. We might need to push the boat out a bit more, says John. Would you try 4-4-2? I would, me, Tom. I don't think Ross's belief of the 4-4-2 formation could succeed in this day and age. What's your views, mate?
Yeah, I think it's a good plan B. I think we've seen it work a couple of times as a definite plan B. I'd stick with 4-3-3, and I think Eddie Howe or iteration of 4-3-3. I'd maybe tweak some of the starting positions a little bit, and I think Eddie Howe is the trouble is that you have with a 4-4-2 is that it often the concern is getting overloaded in that midfield area, that central midfield area. You've got to have 2 in there. Rafa loved a 4-4-2. Rafa was quite happy with a 4-4-2 and managed to coach a team, so it wasn't necessarily outnumbered too heavily in there. So it does have its merits. I think it's certainly a good plan B.
Definitely. It's often the vocal minority that shouts the loudest. That's quite true, mate, as well. If we miss out on James Maddison but got James Ward-Prowse, that would be a good sign. And again, James Ward-Prowse, he's a talented guy. And it's another one which would cost big bucks, but another one I'd like to see. James Maddison, maybe that ship sailed. 2 windows have gone and we've been linked with him, but no movement whatsoever. So, who knows? As his contract winds down, it may be more of an option. Geordie Tumalay says, 4-4-2? Come on, lads. Where is my rattle from the 1970s? Tom says, what is happening with Rodrigo Vilca? He scored yesterday. It'd be great to have him on the bench one day. Another one we're linked with, Ross. This isn't the transfer show, guys, but I get where you're coming from. We do need players in. What's your thoughts on him? It would be another good acquisition.
Yeah. I don't know. Is he not the lad who's in the? Is he the lad who's in the reserves? Is he the lad who's in the 23s? Yeah. I don't know too much about him, to be honest. I've not seen much of him. I don't know too much about him. I haven't watched much of the 23s or 21s, whatever they are these days. I've not seen much of them this season, so I don't know if he's any good or not, to be honest.
Yeah, I've got to be honest. I mean, again, the lower levels of the squad and the team. So the under-21s got beat again yesterday, 5-2 at home off West Brom. And I mean, Vilka scored, but it would suggest to me that we're a million miles away from bringing those kind of players onto the bench or into the squad.
Yeah, you're right. And it's certainly an area that Newcastle want to improve. I think that's very, very evident under Dan Ashworth. I think he wants to improve that top end of the youth setup, the 18s and the 21s. We've said it many times before that Newcastle's production line hasn't been good enough for me over recent years. It's great. It was great to see it at Wembley. It was great to see Sean Longstaff starting the game, Elliot Anderson finishing the game. It was really good to see those academy players who've come through. But I think there's a long way to go before Newcastle's 18s and 21s can develop in the players that can then step into the first team on a regular basis. But we hope that it does. It was talking to Wembley. Matty Longstaff was a few rows in front of me at the game. It was great to see him there. In the bar next door to where we were. Lewis Miley and Jamie Miley, the two Miley brothers, and who were playing in the under 18s. They were there watching the game. Were there before the game, and then obviously at Wembley. So, there is some talent that has come through, and who I think we all would like to see some these good young Geordie players, English lads coming into the team and following in the footsteps of Paul Dummett and Sean Longstaff and Elliot Anderson. But we need a few more, and it needs to be an accelerated process because they're just not quite ready. You can see that by the results and by the performances. They're not quite ready to step in yet.
Yeah, lads not wanting to go in the Champions League is the equivalent of not going to the League Cup for fear of being beat by Man United. Would you have changed that experience even with losing? I get your point, and of course not. Of course not. Okay, coming towards the end of the show, Newcastle, of course, play Wolves at home this weekend, Sunday 4:30 kickoff. Prediction for that, Ross, please.
Oh, it's a big game. It's a big game, this one, Steve. Wolves have found some form under the new manager, Lopetegui. He's done a really, really good job there. They can grind out wins. They've pushed themselves out of that relegation zone and got themselves a little bit of breathing space. So it's not an easy game. It looks obviously a lot easier on paper, but it's a team that have got some momentum behind them and have picked up some form. But that said, it's a game that Newcastle now have to win. If they want to get back and finish this season with some strong momentum and qualify for Europe, these are the types of games at home against the bottom half team that you've got to be looking to win. So I think it's going to be tight. I think it's going to be nervy. I think it's going to be hard fought, but I'm going to go for a 1-0 Newcastle win.
Okay, happy birthday to Hatton Ben Arthur and to Andy Griffin, two former entertainers of our parish back in the day. Ross, as always, absolute pleasure to have you on. Look forward to having you back next week. I'll be back tomorrow night, 6 o'clock, with Geordie's here. Geordie's there. Look forward to seeing you all then. Take care. See you, Ross.
Cheers, Steve. Cheers, everyone.